Let's Get To presents Good Wood, knocking around the majors with Andy Tomchessen.
All right, so we're going to jump into some good wood. And Andy, happy opening day.
Happy opening day to you. It's a happy day all across the land. Spring is springing and the whole world is just renewed again. And the hopes of 30 baseball teams have yet to be dashed.
Yet to be dashed. And according to your logic, and I think it's a sound one, they won't be dashed until sometime around Memorial Day.
Got about 60 days, yeah.
About 60 days. Before we get into the fun part of the show of the who, what, when, and we can then look at our choices, you and I are the only ones making picks on the show this year. We can decide how wrong we were in about 6 months. What has you kind of fired up for the season?
I think, reviewing the stuff and trying to put together a little research for this particular episode and just watching some spring training games in general, there are a handful of exciting young teams in baseball. And I don't remember baseball really having that. You always had one, maybe two, but you look at the Padres, you look at the Braves, you look at the Blue Jays, Tampa Bay to an extent, the White Sox. These are all teams, the Mets, really, parts of the Mets, are teams that are very young, very exciting. If their ownership is smart, they should be able to build together. If their ownership isn't smart and is playing for a season at a time, there's going to be a lot of great players that have a lot of movement soon in baseball terms. Provided there's a baseball season after this one, That's a different episode. We're all excited and happy
We're
episode.
happy today, yeah.
So I think that's a big deal. And I think there's going to be the usual suspects when we get down to the end of the season will still be around, but I think there's going to be enough new blood to make it more exciting. And some of that's going to be a continuation of what we saw in 2020, but I really think you're going to see some teams really making that next leap. And I think that's good for baseball. The Astros benefited from it, certainly, as an Astros fan, but it's not really healthy when you've got three good teams in all of baseball and everybody else is 500 or worse.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to see more competition, better games, and the enthusiasm that younger players bring.
Yeah, that ought to be a topic for later on about just how the economic system actually doesn't look out for the game as a whole. I know it's something we've discussed on the show before, but let's get into the brass tacks of it. Let's start with the geography and the division is far away from us, and we'll work down to the division that you and I are both intimately interested in, and that is the National League East. Who do you have coming out of the East?
I think it is going to be a dogfight between the Braves and the Mets. I know there's a lot of writers who are giving the Nationals love for some reason, and byproduct of the Astros being where they are in spring training in Florida, I've seen a lot of Nationals games from spring training. I'm just not seeing how they're a competitive team. The Marlins are still a couple of years away.
Right.
I think they're better. I don't think they're as in it as long as they were last year. I don't think they're a playoff team. I think it comes down to the Braves and the Mets, and I'm giving it to right now the Braves to win the division with the Mets getting a wild card slot.
Yeah, I have the Braves and I have it in the same order as well. The Braves with the Mets and the wild card. I think I honestly think experience for the Braves is going to really pay dividends, particularly at the end. All right, let's go to the National League Central.
We have some wonderful people who participate on this show and who care a lot about some of these teams. And I've got bad news because it doesn't matter who wins this division. I've got the Cardinals winning the division, but literally you could pick out of a hat between the Brewers, the Cubs, the Cardinals, and maybe even the Reds, although I think the Reds' real shot was last year. I think they're taking a big step back. But it's a bunch of teams that, like the last several seasons, are going to beat up on each other and be pretty much done by the time the playoffs roll around. If you look at, and I've done a thing because I can't just read things, I took, 12 different power rankings, because there's about that many out there right now.
Yeah.
And kind of just, because they're just as valid as my opinions at this point in the season. And if you look at the National League, you've got 2 West teams at the top. You've got 2 East teams at the top. The 6th best team, just based on preseason projections, is the Cardinals.
Yeah.
And then you've got a bunch of East and West teams, and then the rest of that division. But again, the Cardinals, Scott McIntyre will tell you, have nobody in the outfield who can hit. The Cubs are in a fight with their third baseman and lost Kyle Schwarber. Everybody's kind of taken a step back, and the Cardinals seem to thrive in that type of environment. So that's my pick. But I also think they're done in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I the Cardinals as well. I think Arenado is going to give them a big enough offensive boost, and they seem to always be able to find pitching. And so I think that will be enough to, again, get them through a pretty weak division. Now, maybe the most compelling division in baseball, I think right now, the NL West.
This is hard because I want to be the guy who's contrary sometimes. I have the Dodgers winning the division, and the Dodgers are on paper the strongest team in probably the last decade, 2 decades. I mean, they don't really have a weakness on paper. I think they've lost a little bit of their organizational depth. I think they've lost a little bit of their bench strength, but provided they're healthy, it's hard to argue their rotation is going to be bad, is going to be anything but stellar. It's hard to argue their offense is going to be anything but stellar. It's hard to argue their defense is going to be anything but plus. So they're the class of the division. And in a 162 game season, it's really hard to beat that. Now, having said that, if there's a team that could do it, it's also in that division this year, and it's the Padres. The Padres aren't as deep as the Dodgers, but I think they've got some stars that have the ability, and kind of ability we haven't seen a lot in baseball, really throughout their history, in Fernando Tatis Jr., and a guy who can literally put a team on his back. That's hard to do in baseball, and control the outcome of a game. And we saw that in a short season last year. We saw it in the playoffs last year. I think he's one of those players. For me, it was Barry Larkin growing up, that the Reds weren't great, but when Larkin was in town, they were going to win because he was just better than everybody else in the field. And true. I think Tatis Jr. is that guy. Acuna in Atlanta is similar to that, but I think Tatis is at another level. But I have the Dodgers winning the division by virtue of it being a 162 game season.
And then I'm presuming San Diego gets the wild card.
San Diego gets my other wild card slot.
Yeah, I actually have the Padres winning the division, mostly because I believe that Trevor Bauer is a toxic personality, and I think we've seen enough sports where a toxic personality can destroy a clubhouse to the detriment of a team, particularly over a 6-month season. Well, that might just be wishful thinking for me.
Well, I mean, it's wishful thinking that they're actually going to enforce pitchers not putting foreign agents on balls, which is also going to drop his production if you believe, a lot of the spin rate theories that have been going on the last year. I think it's also wishful thinking on the Dodgers' part that David Price is the David Price of 5 years ago. He's a guy who did not pitch last year. He opted out of the season, but has not been great outside of a couple of gutsy playoff performances. Really hasn't been a great player in almost 5 seasons. And I just don't see, as a 5th starter, fantastic. But I think they probably should be giving those more starts to May because I think he's had better upside.
Actually, the news just broke literally that is what's happening. Price is in bullpen.
I mean, that's a smart,
May is the 5th starter.
Play. But I think there's the potential there. So that's where I am on the National League as far as division winners right now.
All right, we're going to go AL Central.
Okay.
What do you got?
For the Central, I picked the Twins again. I think the Bomba squad is there. I don't think the Indians or the White Sox are close enough yet. I think the White Sox, with Jimenez going out for 5 to 6 months with that torn pectoral, that hurts them a lot, and I just don't think they have anything in the organization to fix that. They're still a good team, but they're a good team that talks a lot and doesn't seem to have a lot to back that up with. I mean, they're a lot like the Reds last year. On paper, they look really good, but somehow that product on the field doesn't translate as well. But I also have them as one of my wild card teams. So Twins to win the division, White Sox right behind them is one of the wild cards.
Yeah, I have the same, and it was flipped for me before the Eloy injury. I mean, a ruptured pectoral tendon, I think it was.
Right.
That just sounds awful. So for me, that is what flipped it as well.
I have
We're
to
gonna
remember
go.
back. I have to remember back to having a pectoral muscle, and I would assume that would be painful. Now it would just be, spreading peanut butter over the bread and hoping it got better.
Yeah, I actually couldn't walk for 2 days after a spirited game of fetch with Quint. So that I don't know what that means. American League East. Is it going to be different? How's it look?
No, it's the Yankees. It's still the Yankees. I think they've got more competition in the division this year from Tampa Bay and Toronto, but I think the Yankees are still the class of the division, and honestly, the class of the American League. They've just got too much. They do continue to play that catcher who can't catch, which is a problem for them, but it usually doesn't pop up as a problem until the playoffs start. But I have them. That's probably the biggest lead from a division winner that you're going to see in baseball this year is the Yankees over the Blue Jays.
I'm actually going to go with the Blue Jays to win the East because I think that I think the injury bug is already starting to creep up around the Yankees, and we've seen that through the last 3 or 4 years.
Sure.
Teams built, and I think with the addition of George Springer, I think Vlad Jr. really puts it together. They'll have to find some pitching. But I'm not sure the Yankees are all that deep behind. I know they have Kluber in the 2-hole, but what version of Kluber is going to show up? And, I think they've had some injuries. So I'm actually I know it's a homerish pick, but we're going to go with the fighting Mike Donuses to win the NL East. All right. So now we're going to hop over to the AL West, which is the division you and I care the most about, I think. Is it the A's again, or is it the Astros, or did the Angels finally pitch enough to win?
It's the Astros by 9 games. I just don't see the Angels don't have enough pitching. If their hitters stay healthy, they're going to be a very formidable offense, but they just don't have enough pitching to win 95 games. And I think 95 is the number that wins the division. I also think Ohtani has had a fantastic spring, but has a blister now and had some other naggy injury that showed up yesterday. And that's just been his history. He has these little bursts of being incredible, and he can throw 101 miles an hour, and then you don't hear anything about him for a couple of months because he's hurt something. If he can overcome that, great for them. They still have to overcome playing Pujols on a daily basis, who is a void everywhere but Minute Maid Park. And granted, he destroys us. It doesn't matter.
Even last year, he destroyed us. I was like,
he can come up with a wheelchair and a walker, but is still going to hit home runs in Minute Maid Park. And we'll, thank God he's retiring. But Upton's not a guy you can count on to be healthy. Trout is still probably the best player in baseball overall, but he hasn't gotten that team to the playoffs since 2014. And that window for him, players don't generally get better the older they get. So and Rendon was a good addition, but didn't make a big difference for them last year. And I don't know that it's going to be any better this year. They lose their shortstop. There's holes there. Oakland, too many pieces are gone. I think the Angels finish over Oakland, but I think the Astros win the division going away.
For wild cards, though, you have Blue Jays and White Sox. So you don't think, you think only one team out of the West. Let's look at the NLCS then. Who do you have playing for the World Series in the National League?
Well, before you move on, I do want to mention in the AL West, the Rangers are going to be the worst team in baseball.
Is there anything better than when Arlington is bad? And
the people I know, and I'm sure there are people who think the same thing about Astros fans, and I can, honestly say I'm not one of them because I have followed them my entire life. But my Rangers friends fandom started in 2011 and ended when they stopped making the playoffs. So 2016, and that's it. And now they pretend there's not baseball. They're back to being Cowboys fans, which is great. But it's
that's true. The biggest sports in that city is football and hockey.
Yep.
And then Mavericks, and then there are Rangers fans, and maybe they now that they can go to a ball game without sweating their tuchus off, they can maybe find the game. But
And it's interesting that their ballpark looks like a barbecue pit from the outside. So really think they missed out on getting Weber to sponsor.
it literally looks like Jerry Jones's shed, because you have this beautiful stadium where the Cowboys play, and then you have
And this is where we keep the baseball team.
it's where we keep the lawnmower and the baseball team. Yeah, and I think the Mariners probably finish ahead of the Rangers. Like if the Mariners, I mean, look, if the Mariners can keep putting it together, they are a young team of the future that probably will look pretty good.
I think as soon as next
executives-
year they could make a jump. I just don't think this is the year.
This is the year. All right, let's go then. NLCS. Who do we see playing for the World Series?
NLCS, well, we get through the wild card round just to follow my path of logic here. Padres beat the Mets. Padres go to face the Dodgers. Padres beat the Dodgers because in a short season, I like the Padres' talent and I like the Padres pitching better than I like Trevor Bauer. Braves beat the Cardinals. Padres over Braves. Padres win the National League.
Okay. So let's go. Take us through the AL then. When does my heart get broken? Now I will point out to you, it is an odd numbered year. And that is important.
It is.
Is
I don't know that I'm going to be able to make you happy for my kids though, because I think the loss of Verlander, having that ace, and loss of Springer is going to be too much to overcome.
Okay.
So I've got the Blue Jays over the White Sox, setting up to face the Yankees. Yankees advance out of that. I've got Astros Twins. The Astros advance out of that because the Twins are a cursed franchise. And I'm sorry, Andrew Nelson, they can't win a playoff series. They haven't won a playoff series, I think, since Kent Herbeck played. I don't know that for sure. I'm not going to do the research, but let's just pretend that's real. So it's Yankees Astros again. I think the Yankees finally overcome it because the loss of George Springer is too much for the Astros to overcome. And I think Springer meant that much to the team. He's the difference in winning a 7-game series versus losing a 7-game series at the end of the day. So my World Series is Yankees Padres.
And
because I'm the worst jinx in the world, I've got Padres winning in 6 games. Because I think everything you said about the Yankees, about their lack of pitching depth and the injuries creeping up, and the fact that they play that broom handle as a catcher because he can hit, it's cost them so many playoff series. It makes me so happy because they get so worked up about it. But I think the Padres win their first franchise World Series this year.
okay, I want to ask one more question. I know we're a little over time, but I really want to get your take on it because you mentioned at the beginning these new young teams that are coming up and they play fast, they play hard. Do you see, if you go back to our segment last week with the way the rules changes that some of which we like could evolve, do you see baseball pushing back to more resembling what we saw in the 90s 3-4 years from now?
Yeah, because I think the economics of the game are going to continue to lend itself to younger, faster players. They're cheaper. Home run hitters cost a lot of money. But to get to that level of income, you have to play for a really long time. And I think the economics of the game, the limiting the talent pool that baseball is consciously doing, the economic play is to have a bunch of young, fast players who can grow into power versus having a Yordan Alvarez who is power and nothing else. And I love Yordan. I'm not, picking on him. I think he's a fantastic member of the Astros. But as the example, I don't think he has a place in baseball in 5 years. But I do think Fernando Tatis, Acuna Jr., and those guys, not Yastrzemski, yes, Yastrzemski in the Mariners organization, those guys are incredible, and they take bases, and they're aggressive, and they're young, and they're every bit of that let the kids play. Juan Soto, I haven't even mentioned him.
How old is he again?
21, forever.
Forever.
I hope he gets that marketing deal with them. Detail's dying, but maybe they have some money to spend.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are guys that take the extra base, that they have fun playing the game. The bat flips, the bat flips don't just not bother me. I love the enthusiasm. If you hit the ball out of the park, you steal the base, you get to show off. Pitchers don't like it. They should not let you hit the ball.
And there we go. He is Andy Tom Chesson with Goodwood. Thanks for jumping on, man. We'll be back to talk about how week 1 went next week.
Happy opening day, everybody.